This is a great honor to be in front of such incredibly talented and important people. Morton, thank you for inviting me to be here in Scotland. I am truly humbled, and there's one thing I've learned from listening to the presentations is that there are really two types of people. The really smart APL programmers, and then the rest of us. I feel like I'm sort of in the sleeper movie. Woody Allen's character wakes up 200 years later, and I haven't been programming for 25 years, but I have been programming for about 6 years in a different version of APL, but it was really back in the APLX world, and it's really amazing how far this has come, how the talent that's here in this room has kept this language alive and extended it. It's extraordinary. So I'm very impressed. Now let me show you what happens when you ask your 25-year-old daughter to help you with a presentation. All right. So this is what happens. That bow tie was a moniker for us throughout the era at Security APL, and both myself and my partner Jamie Waller always showed up in a bow tie. And many people told us we lost a lot of sales because we wore bow ties. Nobody buys things from people who wear bow ties. You just don't trust them. And that's probably true. But as Ray just mentioned up at the beginning of this meeting, I think about APL as not so much about a tool of thought, but a tool to solve problems. And so the first thing you need is a problem. This is a problem that my father had been working on for many years. He was a stockbroker, grew up in the family brokerage firm. He was fascinated with the idea of portfolio accounting and performance measurement. That device up there is the Heathkit analog computer. And his construct in 1959 was to wire up each one of these columns as the number of shares in your portfolio. And then, because the shares were fairly static, he chose to use this array up top, the dials, as the price. And what the analog computer would do was send voltages through this, and if wired properly, would register on your display screen the portfolio value. Well, he got tired of that after a while. And he was a tinker. He bought lots of computers. He brought them home. He tried to work on them, got stuck, and asked me to help him. And if this is right, I was 9 years old at the time. The Olivetti 101, 32-step program, we were doing an internal rate of return calculation, and we got it working. We moved on to the Digital Equipment's PDP-8E in 1967 and wrote some more portfolio accounting work in Focal and Fortran and odd things like that. But the aha moment was when he finally bought one of these. And this was in I'm forgetting now, 75, I think, roughly, 75. This is the IBM 5100. You've heard about it. It was a 64, we had 32K memory up front, and it had the disk storage was a tape cartridge that would take 2.5 minutes to go back and forth. So you had to be really, really efficient about how you stored your data. But it was this button on the front panel, which you can't see very well, it said Basic or APL. That was the toy cost, literally. And my father made the right choice. He went to APL. And we started working on trying to do portfolio accounting, performance measurement on the IBM 5100. But inevitably we got stuck. And the one thing that I learned that was the most important thing was that you needed somebody to go to when you got stuck. And this is my mentor, a guy named Paul Waltz. Kind of looks like some of you out in the audience. I revered this guy. He was amazing. He developed a concept of an inverted database for us that still today lives on inside Fiserv. He was the original architect of a lot of that. But I didn't do much more after that because I'd started working on it, and I asked my father for a chance to go to college and not worry about this. But he kept calling me and asking for code changes because things were breaking, and I was reading them, APL code over the phone to him that he would be trying to code. And he didn't really know APL code that well either, so it was a very frustrating process. But he called me up one day and he said, Jay, there's a guy in Boston who is building an APL compiler. I want you to go and see him. So I kind of argued with him, and then I got on the train, went up to Boston. And I spent the afternoon with this kind of wild-eyed college kid who had one of these in his bedroom with ribbon cables going to a disk drive on his bed. And we talked for probably about 3 or 4 hours about how frustrated he was because he was so busy with the details of maintaining, keeping track of where the data was, where it was stored on the disk, all the maintenance issues of managing your environment. So I went back to Dad and I said, I reported, well, this guy has good intentions, but there's no way he's going to build an APL compiler. And about a year later, Dad called me up and he said, I want you to go to Albuquerque, New Mexico with a suitcase of $100,000 bills and $100 and offer it to him for whatever part of the company he'll give you. And I looked at him and said, what, are you crazy? What's the valuation? What's our ownership going to be? And he said, just go do it. And I said, no, I'm not going. So about 3 or 4 years later, when I was graduating from college, he called me up and said, Jay, remember that guy you went to see in Boston? The guy that we were supposed to offer some money for some part of the company, whatever we'll offer you. Well, his company's going public. Should we buy any stock? I said, no, I don't want to buy any stock. And of course, you probably guessed who that was. Bill Gates. The guy in the Harvard dormitory room working on what ultimately would sort of become the idea of DOS. Instead, the disk operating system was the real problem he was struggling with. And I've seen Bill subsequently in many sort of venues at trade shows, and I always make a point of asking him, Bill, when are you going to build that APL compiler? And he always gives me the same answer, I'm still going to work on it. He actually loves APL. We had a long conversation this was in Omaha 2 years ago, playing bridge, another hobby that he and I share. And he still was thinking about an APL compiler. I wouldn't hold your breath. So while I was at college, I also got involved back in APL because I was assigned a task of building a distribution network for the New York Times. We delivered 1,200 papers door to door at Yale across 12 different colleges, and we had to do the logistics and the management of the routes and the papers, and it involved a problem that needed to be solved. And so I jumped on the APL. I jumped on the computer, one of the DEC 2050s that Yale had. They had 2 of them that were given to them by the Department of Defense. One was cordoned off, and under penalty of death did you get anywhere near that because it was doing some AI research for the DoD. But the other one was for student computation. So I jumped on that with my account, and I started building an application, a business, to deliver these papers. Lo and behold, I got a summons from the SysOp, who said, you need to come and see me. I said, why? He said, because there's some funny files showing up on the machine. We don't know what these are. And I said, well, those are APL files. He said, well, you're not allowed to be running a business on educational software, so you need these to be moved now. I said, yes, sir. So it cost me a lifetime subscription to the New York Times to have him rewrite that in C code on some of the Unix boxes that were in the back room. So APL is sort of floating around in my background, but I did take a semester off in my junior year to start up what became Security APL. This has started really as a hobby to calculate portfolio accounting performance measurement for brokers in the family firm. And some of the lessons that we learned along the way was you want to hire obviously good people, but we found that we could take advantage in that time of hiring bright women. Bright women were not getting paid, and they were not getting paid what they were worth. And if we hired and paid them fair value, we got the great women. One of them turned out was employee number 3 who volunteered in a bar in Chicago to come out and fill our paper trays in New York, because she was so excited about being involved in what we did. She today is the head of a $200 million operation in Fiserv, Cheryl Nash. And she was he was number 3 employee and a very, very talented individual. We always had a commitment to service, and while the sun may set on a problem, we never let it rise on a problem. We worked all night to solve that problem. We made sure that it was fixed. There was no bug the next day. That allowed us to be agile and not be too concerned about managing change in the organization. This is my private motto. It was eliminate your job. The rest of it is there's so much more to do. And that got people thinking about trying to be efficient, not to create empires for themselves. We had the hardware always saved us. You know, as you've seen, the migration of high processing power was incredibly important to us. 30% basic. We felt it was like about 30% a year, and we were always able to port our APL when we got involved with Dyalog in '92. And we were always focused on being creative. And I was listening to Stefano talk about this, and allowing that creativity inside the organization, taking the risks, if you will, to do things that you might otherwise not corporately want to do, was so important to us, and we allowed that to continue. But at the end of the day, what made it so powerful was if you put APL in the hands of somebody who's a domain expert, who's got those proverbial 10,000 hours that Malcolm Gladwell talks about, you have an unbeatable combination. And I believe there are a lot of hobbyists who have domain knowledge who can take a tool like APL and create something amazing. So here we are, some pictures quickly running through the series of machines that we have. Here I am on the 5100. This is my father in front of the DEC 2020s. We had a bunch of these until we ran out of gas. Then we moved over to the IBM 4381, which died on us almost immediately. Then we moved to the RS-6000s. And I believe today that that family is what they continue to run on. But you can see in the background here something that was core to our principle, which was that we were always a service bureau. So for your cookbook, I'd like you to consider another model for making money. It isn't always just about creating apps, but you can create a service. This service was based on the old time-sharing service bureau model. People were dialing into these servers. We had 300 baud, 1200, 2400, 4800, and finally the internet came along, and we were able to throw it all out. But we were committed to being able to have people have one central application that we could manage and maintain and distribute changes quickly, not have to have code releases over 6 months. We have, and this is my father in front of what was to be you'll see this in a second, but was a critical resource for us and one of our products. So we had some key sort of inflection points, and these businesses have these. We were bumping along in portfolio accounting, but what happened was there was a whole new concept in portfolio management that involved the wrap business, and this is where the brokers were able to acquire access to money managers and assemble those into a portfolio of money managers. It's like assembling funds, if you will. This was a huge, huge burden on our customer base. APL allowed us to scale and build solutions, and we just took over the market. It was an incredibly important part of our history. In '94, you guys may remember the Mosaic browser splashed on the front page in the New York Times. I went to our guru in the back room and said, "Dave, is this something important?" He said, "Yes." He said, so I took the next plane out to get to this conference, and I was in Cern, Switzerland in 1994. And if you look at the roster of participants, there were only 2 non-academics. There was a guy from Morgan Stanley and myself. And I found this, I believed in it. We wrote, believe it or not, there was a time when there were no quotes on the internet. We were the first provider of quotes on the internet. There was a time when you couldn't trade on the internet. We were the first trades that went across electronically on the internet. And we developed a portfolio accounting engine that would run on the web. So those were our sort of seminal moments. And I sold the company in 1996, and that code base and many of the talented people are still there. And it's just a great tribute to Dyalog and to the great people that we hired that continues on, and a lot of the culture, I think, continues. But I stayed on and for a couple of years left, built a couple more businesses, sold another one, and finally said I want to retire. I'd done enough. And it took me 2 years to get bored. And I said, what am I going to do? Well, there were some people who needed some help, and so I started needing to assemble pieces of software, results from software into something, and then presenting it back out. So I went back to APL. Unfortunately, Dyalog didn't have free APL at the time. They didn't have a product that really ran well on a Mac, which was what I was running on. So I went to APLX. And APLX for 6 years, been developing, and we've built now solutions for one of my hobbies, which is bridge. In the bridge world, they have lots of small clubs that play all over the country, 3,000 of them, and people go every day and they play with their friends. And the problem is that, number one, there isn't a sense of community, that's it. They have a social opportunity with their friends, but they don't have the ability to see how they would have played if they'd played in a larger field. So we created a service that allows them to send their results. We get about 250,000 records every day from the clubs of everything that happened at the club, and we assemble those, and then we show them how they did across the field. And that's fundamentally the application. Now, that gives you a platform to build on, and we're starting to build product on top of that, which is they can get the answer at the end of the game. They get a sheet that tells them how they could have played the hand, what kind of results they should have had, but they don't know how to get there. So the question is, how do you learn how to get there? So we said, well, we want everybody to play the same hands. Now we can get pros to volunteer their time to tell you how to get to the answer. And so that's being done now in two ways. One, and unfortunately going back and forth, I'm going to lose the connections here, so you'll have to believe me on this. But one of the ways it's done is through a written analysis of how to play the hand. But in addition to that, now we've taken a page out of the gaming book, which allows you to record pros thinking about and talking about the hand as they play it. So now you get to see them in the heat of battle talking and sharing their thought process. So you can learn how they think, and as you watch them, as the cards move or the bids move around, you can hear them thinking about, okay, now he's got 3 spades and he's got 4 hearts, and so they're assembling a vision. And if you want to get better at bridge, there's no better way than getting inside the head of one of these pros. So that's what we've been doing with these 3 products. Well, here I am again. I can't tell you how many ports we went through on APL, but it was probably 4 or 5 ports from machines to APLs, and here I am again. But I'm very lucky to be going from APLX to Dyalog. As you know, APLX has discontinued their support, handed over the responsibility to Dyalog. I was probably maybe the first, maybe the second person to hit the wire when I heard this, and I said, okay, what do I need to do? And I managed to talk to Morton pretty quickly. I said, I got 75,000 lines of code, believe it or not, and I know I'm going to get hit for why in the world do you use 75,000 lines of code for this, but it's a whole other story. And what I learned in my interaction with Morton and with his team is that this is an amazing organization. These are talented people who have a commitment to customer response and helping and solving problems. And they built a suite of conversion tools for me that allowed me to convert 75,000. I think we're 99.9% of the way there. I don't know how long that last 0.1 is going to take, but we're getting there. In addition, we're also moving all of their applications off the Mac Pro server sitting in the garage, and it literally is in the garage, to the cloud. We're there. We've got all the code ported. We're running Dyalog APL up there. We're running my server up there. We're running SQL Server, but we're running it on RDS, so we're up in using Maria database up in the RDMS application in Amazon. And the access for hobbyists to that kind of a platform is amazingly powerful. You can do just about anything that you can envision. And if you have APL behind you to pull all the pieces together, one of the things that's a bit of a challenge for us is that we use about 30 or 40 different other services that we have to call out to use, and maintaining that is a bit of a challenge. Now, my involvement in bridge went from being a player to getting sucked into running a club to then moving up into the state organizations, and now I'm on the national board. And on the national board, we've got an education foundation that has a significant amount of money that wants to put some money on the table to anybody who can build an app that will help us develop bridge players. And there's some specific criteria on the website. If you want to look at, Google ACPL Ed Foundation. You can see the details. There's a $20,000 prize for anybody who can do this, and I would argue that iota 100 is not the key number, but it's iota 52, okay, for the number of cards. Now, I want to go back, now that I've explained to you what the portfolio accounting system and all was all about. Do any of you all remember the analog computer? Okay. Does that remind you of an operator? Well, I've checked with a couple of you guys, and it sounds more like plus dot times. Okay, enterprise, okay, great. So think about it. That was you came up with a representation of that analog computer in 1959. So this is the group of people assembled 16 years after we sold the company. These are APLers. These APL alumni and maybe even continuing to be employees now of Fiserv assembled together in New York, and it was really one of the proudest moments for me. These are people whose lives were changed by what we did and by APL. And they are huge champions. And I take great pride in having been a mentor for these guys. So it starts with a mentor, my father, Paul Waltz, and kind of ends with a mentor, but a bunch of mentors. So my question to you, and by the way, that what next? That was the first thing that Paul Waltz taught me, is that you need to have a prompt. And that prompt was, what next? And it was infuriating because it made you do something. And it's very funny, if you get an email from me, you'll see this in the email. And it's hysterical how I get in these email conversations with people that go on for 3 or 4 threads. And then I finally realize they think I'm asking, what's next? And so they're responding. So it's really a wonderful trigger for action. But my question to you and challenge to you is, and many of you are already doing this, is who will look at you and say you were their mentor? We need to build a big base of users, and that's going to come from hard work, from ground level work, people standing up and saying, I want to teach you, I want to get you involved. And I know many of you are doing that, but I want to thank you all again and challenge you to help me be helpful to APL. I'm back, and I want to help develop mentors. I want to help build APLers, and I want to help Dyalog be successful.